Hey friends, I'm Pragmatik, and it's the month of July, which means we devote the entire month to a game genre or a specific game for that entirety of the month. And that game is going to be one of my personal favorites, Final Fantasy Tactics. I love this game, so I hope that you'll join me in going over some of the best elements of Final Fantasy Tactics. And you'll have to forgive me, but I do have a bit of a cold going on. I feel like at this point it's tradition to have a cold because every time we get this month, I always have some kind of like cold or something. So enjoy that, and let's get into it. Okay, so what we're going to do here is rank every job class from the OG PS1 Final Fantasy Tactics. I'm excluding all the extra jobs that are usually exclusive to certain characters, but I guess I will keep Dark Knight and Onion Knight in there, even though I'm pretty sure those were classes exclusive to the War of the Lions. We'll put them somewhere. Alright, so let's get started. First, we have the most basic of the basic, and that is the Squire. You have to have a Squire, it's where you start out. Overall, I love their dumb little design of just being like, well, here I am. And the move pulls they learn are not great. I mean, you can throw a rock or, shout at someone. Ramza actually exclusively gets some pretty good skills that make him a little more broken than other characters. So overall, I think they're pretty great. We're going to put them at B. Archers are your all-around range class. They don't learn much more than being able to charge up their moves and deal more damage with their arrows. Their range is their biggest thing, and I'm probably going to sound like a huge hypocrite here in a little bit because, well, you'll get to it. But overall, I think they are a good class to have, especially if you want to cover some more field damage. So we're also going to probably put them at B for now. I'm actually going to move you down here because I want to talk about you later. Where's your counterpart? There you are. Get over here. So we're going to go next here with the Wizard. Wizards are pretty tough. They learn some of the best moves later on. You kind of have to train them up to get to that point, but it's always good to have one on your team. They are good magic pool users. You're definitely going to want one. I feel like I always have at least one, but probably not as much as a white mage. So we're definitely going to say they are a more essential cast character person and put them in A. This is a little A wizard. Plus the female version's super cute. White mages, on the other hand, are super imperative. I feel like I always have one on my class. I probably have a wizard and a white mage, but I'm always guaranteed to have a white mage. They also learn some great powerful moves later on, and they are going to be your healers, of course. So I feel like they're just a bit more imperative than maybe a wizard, but I'm still going to put them at A. Chemists are also a pretty big godsend. It's nice to have something that can heal you and cure you without having to depend on magic, and the range that they can do so is also pretty great. So basically, it's kind of like having healing without the casting time. These are great. Probably gonna put them at A. Not S tier stuff, but definitely, even though it is something very basic, you want a chemist on your team, at least for the beginning, then until you can get something better. Geomancers are pretty cool. They're very conditional characters. They have to have certain criteria met before they can use their moves, so it kind of puts them at a small disadvantage, but it's kind of cool to see that variety that they can have. Probably not my favorite. I've definitely had a few playthroughs where I've used them before, but I feel like you never really need one. It's just kind of a cool class to mess with, so we're going to put them at B. Cool outfit though. Knights are your powerhouses. You probably want one at the beginning just to have a bit more power on your side. You can also tip the scales with how they're able to break shields and armor and even weapons. So something like that is a huge, advantage whenever it works. I feel like the rate of these things ever working is kind of low, but when it works, it does change up the battlefield quite a bit. So I don't know if these are quite A. I always usually have one to start, but it doesn't take long for me to change the class into something else, so we're going to put them at B. By the way, if you disagree, I hope you absolutely tell me in the comments. I want to know what your classes that you use are, but these are the ones I prefer. I will tell you, however, in any playthrough I've ever played, I have never used a mime. They have so much requirements to be met before you get this job class, and I think it is worth it in the long run. I think it does help in later fights, but I've just never really had the desire to do all that stuff to get to this point. So while I think they are cool, I love the design, I think they're probably worth it in the long run. I'm probably going to put them at like maybe a C. I might change that later. I just don't know enough about them. Monks, on the other hand, are a absolute godsend of a class. They have self-healing, they have distance fighting, they don't really need any weapons, so they're not expensive to use, and they have one of the best abilities in the world, which is Hameto. Basically, anything that physically attacks them, they can counter it and deal like twice as much damage. And this happens so often. It is such a status condition that like usually more often than not will activate rather than not. So they're one of the best classes to have. They are definitely, to me, an S tier class. Oracles are weird. They are like heavily status element causing things. They're not great. They don't do a lot of damage. They're kind of just conditional classes, but I love them. I love their design. I think they look cool. I usually always have one, or at least have a subclass that knows some of their abilities just to try to help lay out some additional status element damage. And honestly, they're just cool to look at. Probably one of my favorite classes, so they're definitely going to A. I will probably say, just conditionally, one of the best classes to have is a ninja. Ninjas are amazing. They can dual wield, and if you train yourself to have the ability to wield different types of weapons, you can do some serious damage, since they're always able to attack twice, and they can stealth themselves, they can throw items. It's really a godsend of a class, especially for a one-on-one fight that, if you know anything about Final Fantasy Tactics, you know what I'm talking about. You may have had this class whenever you did that certain fight. I always do. I always make sure I have this class before I go into that fight, because I hate that fight so much. So, without a doubt, ninjas are S tier for sure. Mediators are dumb, little dumb pots wearing on their heads classes, but you know, I always use one. I always like just, oh yeah, I'll choose a mediator, see what they can learn, and they got pretty useful things like negotiators. They can change the conditions of things. They're great little characters. I just think their outfits look stupid. Even I always use one, but I'll just say I'm gonna put them in B. They're just not my favorite class. Interesting, but I don't know. There's better classes out there. You might disagree with me, but samurais. Awesome, cool abilities, great design. They are kind of stupid. And I always say that because of this. When I first played Final Fantasy Tactics, when I found out that you could get a job class of samurai, I immediately trained Ramza to be a samurai, because I wanted him to have all the cool samurai moves. But the thing about them is they can't learn abilities unless they have the sword that goes with the ability. And as the game progresses, it takes a while, but you can get those swords. But at the time, you only get about 2 or 3 swords till you get to that battle that I'm talking about. And I was so low classed and with an ability class of samurai, I could not get past that level, and I had to restart the entire game. This is a great class, it's super cool, but I feel like its worth doesn't become more available until you're later in the game. So for that, I'm going to say the risk and reward is not great enough to put them at A, but we'll definitely put them at like a B. Now here's where I become a hypocrite, because my favorite class in any Final Fantasy is always a Dragoon. And Dragoons in Final Fantasy Tactics are pretty great. They don't learn many abilities. Their biggest thing is that they can just jump further than they could, and it comes to a point where they can cover nearly the whole map. But beyond that, they don't learn a lot, which is kind of like archers, but unlike archers, I love them and they're my favorite. But they also do learn the cool ability of Dragon Spirit, so anytime they get hit, they cast auto rays on themselves, and they basically become these immortal, level covering beast warriors that you just have to have. So, of course, absolutely S tier. I would say in nearly every playthrough I've ever had, I always have a summoner. The more I think about it, I think they become less and less worth it. They take so long to summon, and usually by the time they do it, like, characters can move outside of the damage field, or they can absorb the element depending if they have like something that takes that element. So sometimes it's just more of a gamble to actually use it. I love their little dumb horns on their heads and everything else. I like the design, but overall, while they are a cool class, they are not the most reliable, and I'm actually going to put them at B. Thieves are like your run-of-the-mill counterpart to knights. They can steal money, they can charm enemies, they can steal weapons, and you know, that's great, but I feel like the chances of those ever working are kind of low, so I do usually have like a thief at the beginning, maybe just to have some alternate moves, but overall, I don't think anybody carries a thief until the end of their game. Hey, if you do, let me know. I mean, I'd love to hear why. But we're probably going to put them at a, I don't know, maybe even a C. I just don't feel like they're as useful as other classes. Time mages are always in my team in every playthrough. They're not the best class, but I always love them. I like their dumb little design, and they are pretty useful. They do learn one of the better moves later in their move pool, and it's always a good advantage to have a character that can slow down enemies or speed up your allies. So they are one of the more beneficial characters, I would say, to a team. And for that, they are definitely going to hit the A tier. I will say, in all of Final Fantasy Tactics, there is no class more broken than a dancer. If you get a dancer, all you have to do is teach them Nameless Dance and just have them dance in the corner of the map, and you can win almost any fight. What Nameless Dance does is it affects every enemy on the field, no matter where they are, and has a big chance of causing several status effects, like frog, or slow, or poison, or anything. So really, any fight you get into, if you have that going on somewhere in the background, you can win pretty much any fight just because this one character is just dancing and no one can get close enough to stop them. That's why they're one of my favorite classes. I think bards are kind of like the male equivalent to dancers, so I'm going to assume that they are as broken as dancers are, so they automatically get that pass to S. I'm just gonna, if I'm wrong, please tell me, but I think that's the case, that they just have the same kind of move pool as a dancer, since they're just the male and female equivalents. Never in my life have I ever used a calculator. I never use this class. I think it looks cool. I don't really care for a class that just deals in numbers, deals in math. So, sorry, I'm going to put them in D tier. And if I'm wrong about this, please tell me. Absolutely. I would want you to convince me to maybe in my next playthrough use a calculator, because I never have. I don't know why. I just don't care for them. Tell me I'm wrong, please. And then we have these final two classes, and while I am familiar with like Dark Knight moves, I've never really used an Onion Knight because I'm way more familiar with the original PS1 game and not so much the War of the Lions. I know this is kind of exclusive to that, but I mean, an Onion Knight is an Onion Knight, so automatically probably obligated to give them an A tier class. Dark Knights, from what I know, have a pretty good move pool. They can do some heavy damage and some damage that can even heal them, so honestly, you can't go wrong with a class like that, so we're obviously going to give them an A2. And there you go. I seem to have an affection for monks, ninjas, lancers, dancers, and like bards, I guess. Everything else is great except for calculators. Please prove me wrong. And thieves are thieves. Sorry. Let me know in the comments whether you think I'm wrong or do you agree with me. I think I was at least pretty generous, so don't be too mean. Alright, see ya.